This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good morning, everyone. I just had the zchus to speak here the Shabbos before last, so it's so wonderful to be back. And we begin with Sefer Shemos. Sefer Shemos is a new chapter in our history. And whenever you want to understand the essence of something, you always have to look at the name. The name of something captures its essence. And if Chazal are searching and looking to attribute a name to Sefer Shemos, you could be sure that the entire essence of the Sefer rests in this name. So let's begin with the words of the Ramban. The Ramban, in his introduction to Sefer Shemos, dubs Shemos a new name, a name that we don't find in the Gemara, a name that we don't find in Chazal. First, Ramban tells us about Sefer Bereshis. These comments of the Ramban deserve a treatment unto themselves, but today we're going to focus on Shemos. The Ramban says, now that we've completed what the Ramban calls Sefer HaYetzira, let's discuss that briefly. Now that we've completed Sefer HaYetzira, the Ramban creatively, this is the Chiddush of the Ramban, refers to Bereshis as the book of Yetzira, the book of creation. And the Ramban is troubled. Is Yetzira really the appropriate word to use for the entirety of Sefer Bereshis? After all, only Parshas Bereshis talks about creation. Why refer to the entire Sefer as Sefer HaYetzira? So Ramban says, well, the book begins by describing the creation of the world, ex nihilo yesh me'ayin. But then the Ramban goes on to tell us his famous principle that really the entirety of Bereshis creates the history and the destiny of the Jewish people through the principle of Maseh, Avos, Simon, Lebanim. That every footstep, every movement that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov made was a pre-enactment, was a portent, created the future, the history of the Jewish people. Therefore, the entire book is called Sefer HaYetzira. It occurred to me, a few years ago, I was standing at the Maras HaMachpelah, and I came out. And if you come out of the Maras HaMachpelah and you go to the edge of the wall and you make a left, there is a matzeva for the Ramban. Now, the Ramban actually has more than one matzeva. There's a matzeva for the Ramban in Haifa. Others attribute a different location to the Ramban. But there is an official matzeva of the Ramban right at the footsteps of the Maras HaMachpelah. So it occurred to me, perhaps the Ramban, whose commentary on the Chumash is predicated on the Yesod, Maseh, Avos, Simon, Lebanim, it's appropriate that the Ramban should be at the footsteps of the Avos HaKadoshim. But says the Ramban, now that we finished Sefer HaYetzira, we move on to what the Ramban calls Sefer HaGalos VeHaGeula, the book of exile and redemption. The beginning of Shemos, therefore the Ramban says, even though we already know that Klal Yisrael went down to Mitzrayim, but the Torah reiterates that Klal Yisrael went down to Mitzrayim because this is the book of Galos. And now the obvious question is, okay, so the book should really end in Parshas B'Shalach. After all, we're redeemed from Egypt in Parshas B'Shalach. Okay, so maybe you'll throw in Parshas Yisroi. Maybe the redemption is not complete until we accomplish the objective of the redemption, which is Kabbalas HaTorah. But for all intents and purposes, the book should end after Parshas Yisroi. Says Ramban, a very important chiddush, that Shemos does not end. Let's look at the words of the Ramban inside, if you have on the sheet of number 1. V'hinei hagalos on the 7th line, einenu nishlam ad yoim shuvam el mekaimam. The galus does not end until we revert back to when we get to our original place. What's the original place? V'al malas avoisam yashuvu. The objective of Shemos is to go back to the madrega of the Avos HaKadoshim. And when we left Mitzrayim, even though we were freed from bondage, we were still considered goylem because we were in the Midbar. We were confounded in the Midbar. But when we come to Har Sinai, so just end there, says Ramban, and we made the Mishkan, we built the Mishkan, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu returned to us, and He rested His Shechina amongst us. And then the Ramban says a principle. I remember when I was a bacher, I grew up here in Flatbush on Emin 31st, but as a bacher, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me at least a little good seichel that I used to walk to Harav Avigdor Miller Shul for 3 years. I'm not going to say every Shabbos, but many Shabbosim, From Emin 31st to Rav Miller. Rav Miller would always say that these words of the Ramban, that the Hashras Hashchina in the Mishkan, and by the way, if you know Rav Miller and you know that house, you could get a little feel for this just knowing the house where Rav Miller lived. Rav Miller would say the Hashras Hashchina in the Mishkan was only a semblance and a me'ain of the Hashras Hashchina in the tent of Avraham and Sarah. The purpose of the Mishkan was to bring back the Hashras Hashchina that existed in the home of Avraham and Sarah. The Ramban calls this Soid Eloika Alei Ahalehem, the secret of the divine presence upon their tent. In other words, if you want to know what's the climax of Sefer Shemos, the last pasuk in Shemos is the Shechina resides on the Mishkan, symbolic of the Hashras Hashchina in the home of Avraham and Sarah. So therefore the Ramban learns that Sefer Shemos is basically bringing the world back to the way it was in the times of Avraham Avinu when the Shechina dwelt in the home of Avraham and Sarah. This is the approach of the Ramban to Sefer Shemos. Sefer Shemos is basically bringing the world back to the Madrega of the Avos HaKadoshim, Hein Merkava L'Shechina. That's the Ramban. But let's take the approach of the Ramban one step further. Because the Ramban is learning that the objective of Shemos is to bring the world back to the way it was in the tent of Avraham and Sarah. The only thing is, Bereshis did not begin with Parshas Lech Lecha. Bereshis began not with the Hashras Hashchina in the tent of Avraham and Sarah. Bereshis began with the Hashras Hashchina in Gan Eden. In fact, if you look in the Medrash, if you look at number 2, the Medrash in Parshas Nasai tells us that when the Mishkan was completed, it says the word Vayehi. It says the Medrash, what does Vayehi mean? Vayehi implies that something is returning back to the way it once was. That when HaKadosh Baruch Hu originally created the world, the Shechina rested in this world. Like it says, Vayishmu as Kol Hashem mishalich bagan. And then the Shechina departed, and other Midrashim go on to say the Shechina departed step after step after step, 7 steps, until finally HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes down and he gives the Torah on Har Sinai, and the Shechina comes back to the Mishkan. So the Hashras Hashchina in the Mishkan was basically bringing the world not only back to the Madrega of the Shechina on the tent of Avraham and Sarah, but the Madrega of the Shechina in Gan Eden. So in that sense, the full redemption is not accomplished until the world comes back to Vayishmu es Kol Hashem mishalech l'ruach hayom, the voice of Hashem in Gan Eden. So this is just extending the argument of the Ramban one more step. Let's take this a little bit further. There's an interesting Gemara in Saita. Did you know the Gemara in Saita invented a new name for Sefer Shemos? This is a name that you won't find anywhere besides one line in Masechta Saita, and it's codified by the Bahag. We know Sefer Bereshis is called Bereshis. The Ramban calls it Sefer HaYetzirah. Vayikra is either Vayikra or Toras Kayanim. Bamidbar Chumash HaPekudim. Devarim, Mishnah Torah. Comes the Gemara in Saita. You want to hear a novel? You want to hear an original name? You know, sometimes you hear names, like you think, what are the parents thinking? Where'd they come up with that one? Listen to an original name for Shemos. Says the Gemara, Loi kederach shechalukin b'chumash hapekudim, ela kederach shechalukin b'chumash sheni. Book 2. Book 2, the Gemara calls it. The Gemara does not refer to it as Shemos. The Gemara refers to it as Book 2. And this is going to be a subject of what we're going to try to focus on this morning. Did the Gemara run out of creativity when it got to the book of Shemos? That it has no better name than Book 2. Even the Ramban came up with a name. Sefer HaGeula, Sefer HaGolos VaHaGeula. Call it Shemos, Book 2. The Netziv asks, either call all the books 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or give everyone a name. Why did Shemos? Shemos is not momentous enough that you could come up with a name for Shemos. Why Book 2? Comes in Netziv, the Netziv says a beautiful verbiage. Shuta de Rabbi Seinu nitnu lalamed. The expression of the Chachamim is worthwhile to learn from. In other words, if the Chazal referred to Shemos as Book 2, you could be sure that laden in this terminology is the essence of Sefer Shemos. Says the Netziv something amazing. In fact, Sefer Shemos is not a separate book. It's part 2 of Bereshis. Bereshis talks about the creation of the world. However, upon the conclusion of Bereshis, if you were to look at the world, you would see the world was not really fully created yet. Why not? So let's introduce this with the following lamdas. It was just the yard side of the Ktsois HaChoshen. You know, by the way, the Ktsois, Rabbi Aryeh HaKohen wrote 3 classic lamdas Svarim. Wrote Ktsois HaChoshen, Avnei Miluim, Shev Shmaitza. These are the Svarim in all the Olam HaYeshivos. These are like the crown jewel of lamdas. So they asked the Ktsois HaChoshen, why was he Zoiche, in his opinion, to write these 3 Svarim? Ktsois HaChoshen said 3 times in his life, he couldn't fast on Yom Kippur. And he had such chalishas hadas. Now you know the Ktsois HaChoshen lived in such poverty. It was so cold in his house that he had to sleep with his inkwell under his arm, under the blanket, so that the ink wouldn't freeze. That's how he wrote the Ktsois HaChoshen. 3 times in his life, he wasn't well enough to fast on Yom Kippur. He felt so terribly that he wasn't able to fast, that in the zechus of the tsar that he couldn't fast, he feels he was zoicha to write these 3 svarim. You know, very often in life we think that our greatest accomplishments are the things that we do, and the things we're not able to do, we feel bad we're not able to do that. You know, it's a source of pain sometimes. But sometimes the greatest zechus is the feeling, the longing of wishing a person could do maybe more than they're able to. That the Ktsois attributed was the zechus that he was able to write these svarim. The Ktsois brings down the following question. Yaakov Avinu buys the Bechorah from Esav. What does he buy it with? He buys it for a pot of beans. What was the Bechorah? The right to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Frek the Ktsois, it's davar shaloi bal olam. Ein adam makna davar shaloi bal olam. It's a famous kasha of the Ktsois. The Ktsois brings Shaus Tshuvas Rivash. The Rivash says, before the Torah was given, adam makna davar shaloi bal olam. Before the Torah was given, you could be makna something that's not in the world. So the Achronim ask, what difference does it make before the Torah was given and after the Torah was given? What's the reason you can't be makna davar shaloi bal olam? Because you can't muster up the das to formulate an acquisition on something that doesn't exist yet. So what difference does it make? The Torah is here, the Torah is not here. You can't make a kinyan on davar shaloi bal olam. So one of the great Polish Gaonim, Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna, my grandfather's grandfather, was a Talmud of Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna. He helped Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna publish the Sefer. We're going back to Poland in the 1860s. Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna. He writes that before the Torah was given, the whole world was davar shaloi bal olam. Like the Chazal say, Vayera vayivoker yom hashishi, that until the Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, the world was mitli tali v'kai. The world was suspended in midair. It had no stability. Not until the Torah was given did the world actually exist. So how did they make kinyanim before the Torah was given? It must be they had kinyanim worked on davar shaloi bal olam. After the Torah was given, so then it went back to reasonable acquisition that only on davar shabala olam you can make a kinyan. But before the Torah was given, the whole world was loy bala olam. Says in Netziv, Bereshis is the book of creation, but the world's not created yet. Because until the Torah was given, the world doesn't really fully exist. The world may not exist if Klal Yisrael doesn't accept the Torah. It's mitli tali v'kai. It's dependent on Kabbalas HaTorah. So Bereshis is the book of creation. Shemos is book 2 of creation. So you'll ask, okay, but that doesn't explain why the entirety of Sefer Shemos is book 2. That only explains why until Kabbalas HaTorah it's considered book 2. So let's bring another important yesod. The next yesod is that until the Mishkan was made, the world also did not fully exist. The Lashon of the Medrash is, if you take a look in number 5, the Medrash in Parshas Nasar, Rabbi Shua ben Levi b'shem Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, it says, Vayihi b'yoyim kalois Moshe lahakim es ha-mishkan. It doesn't say lahakim ha-mishkan, es ha-mishkan. Zak the Medrash, es is coming to include something else was erected on the day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed us to build the Mishkan. That along with the Mishkan, the world was built. Because until the Mishkan stood, the world was roifeif, the world was roisis, the world was wobbly. The Mishkan gave stability to the world. So this gives us further understanding of the words of the Netziv. That until the Mishkan was built, the world did not fully exist. So Bereshis is the book of creation, and Shemos is book 2 of creation. But the creation of the world was not complete until A, the Torah was given, B, the Mishkan was built. Which now we understand why Chazal tell us, Yoidea haya betzalel, letzaref ha'oisiyos shebahem nivru, shamayim ba'aretz. Chazal say that Betzalel knew the letters with which Hashem created heaven and earth. Good for him. I'm glad that he knew that. Why do we need to know that Betzalel knew the letters with which Hashem created heaven and earth? The answer is because you would wonder, how could Betzalel build a Mishkan? But by building the Mishkan, he was building the world, because the world didn't have stability until the Mishkan stood. The answer is, don't worry, don't sweat it. Betzalel knew the letters with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created heaven and earth. Memela, he knew how to build a Mishkan with which it gave stability to heaven and earth. So let's discuss briefly some of the ingredients of the Mishkan, and we'll have a new understanding of perhaps why some of these ingredients were needed. Because what we're learning is Sefer Shemos is one thematic Sefer. By the way, I'll share with you a little trivia. We're going to take a little break, a little trivia question here. Okay? Does anybody know how many Parshios are in Sefer Shemos? 11, right? Shemos, Ba'era, Ba'i, B'Shalach, Yisroi, Mishpatim, Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakab, B'Kudei. The Abarbanel, in his Hakdama to Shemos, Abarbanel says, why are there 12 Parshios in Sefer Shemos? I didn't say 11, I said 12. The Abarbanel asks, why are there 12 Parshios in Sefer Shemos? He says, because think about Bereshis. How many Parshios in Bereshis? 12 Parshios in Bereshis. Bereshis speaks about Abraham, speaks about Yitzchak, speaks about Yaakov, and speaks about Yosef. And the 4 of them get 12 Parshios. Comes Shemos, talks about Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe himself gets 12 Parshios. Lelamed she Moshe Rabbeinu shakol keneged kol ha'avos kulam, says Abarbanel. That's Abarbanel. Last January, now don't do this at home. For many years, I had a big cheshek to visit the kever of Reb Chaim Falaji. I had to go to the kever of Reb Chaim Falaji. I got very into the Svarim of Reb Chaim Falaji. Anybody know how many Svarim Reb Chaim Falaji wrote? 72 Svarim. And by the way, after he wrote many of the Svarim, his house burnt down, and he lost the original manuscripts. And he was so tzabrachin he couldn't get out of bed. And his son came to him and started trying to remind Reb Chaim Falaji. He had to rewrite many of the Svarim from memory. Reb Chaim Falaji wrote 72 Svarim. The way I remember it is he was Nifter Parshas Yisroi that has 72 Psukim. By the way, Rav Hutner would say the Yartzeit of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter is Parshas Mishpatim, because Rabbi Yisrael always focused on Dinei Hezek. Many people are machmer on all kinds of things. People have all kinds of chumras. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter would say, the most important thing to be machmer on is not stealing money or damaging other people. Erev Yom HaKippurim, they wanted to see, what did Rabbi Yisrael Salanter do Erev Yom Kippur? Here, Tzaddik Hadar, what did he do on Erev Yom Kippur? He probably woke up very early, and he went to the mikvah, and he was toivel many times. So they followed him around. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Erev Yom Kippur, after davening, he went straight to the kitchen. Oh, he's probably very makbid to eat. No. He went straight to the toolbox. And he took out a hammer, and he put it under his jacket. And he proceeded to go to the first shul and check every single chair that there were no nails sticking out, so that nobody would tear their suit, and the owner of the shul would go up to Shemayim on Leil Yom Kippur having 5 cents of damage on their cheshbon. So he knocked in the nails of every chair. And then he went up to the Ezras Nashim, and he knocked in the nails of every chair in the Ezras Nashim. And he proceeded to do so to the 9 shuls in the city, and then he went to Kol Nidre. Kach Asa Rabbi Yisrael Salanter Erev Yom Kippurim. Rabbi Yisrael would say it's a big mistake to learn Shas, Brachos, Shabbos, Erevin. You don't learn Shas that way. Why not? He says Brachos are all D'Rabbanan. Maybe except Brachos Hamazayin, Brachos HaTorah. Shabbos, Ruba D'Rabbanan. Erevin is D'Rabbanan. Where should you start? Baba Kama, Baba Matzia, Baba Basra, because a penny that doesn't belong to you is always the Iraisa. Rabbi Yisrael said, that's why we start Nezikin. That's the Iker is Nezikin, Rabbi Yisrael would say. So I'm just saying, Rabbi Yisrael's yahrzeit is Parshas Mishpatim, Rav Hutner would say. So I like to think Reb Chaim Falaji is Parshas Yisroi. So I wanted to go to Reb Chaim Falaji's kever. Luckily, I went before October 7th, because he's buried in Turkey. And I was at Reb Chaim Falaji's kever. Next to Reb Chaim Falaji is Reb Elio HaKohen of Izmir, the Baal Sheva Musar. And I'm walking around over there, and I see a kever. It says it's covered in weeds. We clear it off, we clean it up. Reb Yitzchak Falaji, the son of Reb Chaim Falaji. I didn't know anything about him. I never heard of him. That week, I'm looking for a shiur. I have to say a shiur on Wednesday. I need a good topic. It was Parshas Kisisa. So I was interested in a shiur. I was interested in the topic, is there ayin hara when you do a mitzvah? Let's say a person does a mitzvah, it's barabim. Is there any cheshash of ayin hara when you do a mitzvah barabim? It gets into the subject of, let's say, Matan Torah, which was barabim, so the luchos rishonos were broke because it was very public. So I saw there's a tshuva from Reb Chaim Falaji. So I open up the tshuva. Reb Chaim says, actually, this subject, if you want to know about this subject, my son Rabbi Yitzchak was an expert on this subject, and he codifies an entire tshuva from his son Rabbi Yitzchak Falaji. I had never heard of him. I came back. All of a sudden, Rebbeinu Shalom was mazmin to me. Chidushei Torah from Rabbi Yitzchak Falaji. Rabbi Yitzchak Falaji asks on the Abarbanel, B'mechilas Kvay Torah, what does he mean that Shemos has 12 parshias commensurate with Bereshis? It's not true. Shemos has 11 parshias. So there's a descendant today, Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sefer, descendant, maybe a grandson or a great-grandson of the Kaf HaChaim, the original Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sefer. He's a very big Mechaber Svarim. He brings something very interesting. Does anybody ever look at Rabbeinu Bechaye in Parshas Mishpatim? Rabbeinu Bechaye in Parshas Mishpatim, we know the derech of Rabbeinu Bechaye is that before every parsha, he gives you a hakdama based on Mishlei. He explains a pasuk in Mishlei, he gives an exposition on the pasuk in Mishlei, and he uses that as a hakdama to the parsha. In Mishpatim, the Rabbeinu Bechaye has 2 parshios. Right before him, Kesef Talve Esami, there's a break, and there's a new introduction from Mishlei. Likewise, in the Sefer HaChinuch, when he counts the mitzvahs of Mishpatim, he breaks it into 2. Mishpatim, Ve'ela Mishpatim, and Im Kesef Talve. So Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sefer says there's no doubt that Barbanel is going with Minhag Sefarad and Minhag Kastil, and if you look in the Rishonim, they maintain this Minhag, then indeed there are 12 parshios in Sefer Shemos. That's also an interesting yediyah on Sefer Shemos. It's not really, we're not noihig that way, but fundamentally there should be 12 parshios in Shemos. Let's examine a little bit Parshas Truma. If you go to your second sheet, we're going to examine, in light of what we learned, a few parshios, a few ingredients in the Mishkan. We know we have the Habriach Hatichain B'toich HaKroshim. You have the Briach Hatichain. Where did the Bria Chatichon come from? Where did they get this piece of wood to go through the entire Mishkan? We know miraculously the Bria Chatichon was flexible. It went in one wall, it curved. It was one long stick that attached the entire Mishkan. What? So look in Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. V'nigra mitzia b'goy luchaya mishalbesh min siyafe l'siyafe min ilana dinetziv Avraham bever shava. The Bria Chatichon was the tree that Avraham Avinu planted in Beersheva. The Eshel of Avraham, the Bria Chatichon. Fine. We're familiar with that. What about the Krushim? Where did the planks come from? It says, V'asisa es ha-Krushim. Zok Rashi, Hayaloi loimer v'asisa Krushim. What's the Krushim? Me'oisen ha'im de michadum lekach. Designated wood. Yaakov Avinu nata arazim sam. Yaakov planted it in Egypt. He said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to redeem you. Make sure you have this together. Make sure you take it out. So the Bria Chatichon was from Avraham Avinu. The Krushim was from Yaakov Avinu. What did Yitzchak contribute? The Mishkan was complete on Chaf Hei Kislev. So Klal Yisrael said, no, let's inaugurate. Hashem said, no, we need to wait for the birthday of Yitzchak Avinu, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So it's interesting that the Avos contributed to the Hakamas HaMishkan, to the Binyan Mishkan. Why do you think the Avos contributed to the Hakamas HaMishkan? Says Rabbi Leib Hyman in the Sefer Chikrei Lev, according to the Ramban, according to Ramban's understanding of Sefer Shemos, that it's the book of Geula, but we're not redeemed until we revert back to the Madrega of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So now we understand to get back to the level of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we need some help from Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So therefore, some of the main ingredients of the Mishkan, the Bria Chatichon was from the tree of Avraham Avinu. And the Krushim were from the trees that Yaakov planted. And it was erected on the day that Yitzchak Avinu was born, because the purpose of the Mishkan was to bring the world back to Soid Eloika Alei Oyhaleim. So we need some help. We need a boost from the Avos HaKadoshim. But didn't we added that the purpose of Shemos is not just to take the world back to the Madrega of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We also want to get back to what? Adam Arishain. So let's examine this further. Because not only were many of the ingredients, not only did they come from the Avos, but we know Chazal tell us that there were a number of ingredients that had a very remarkable place of origin. Look at number 13. V'hanasiyim heviu, the Nasiyim brought, is avnei hashayam, es avnei hamiluim. The shayam stones for the choyshen, the miluim stones for the ephod, la'ephod v'la'choyshen, ves haboisem, ves Hashem and lamar, l'Hashem and hamishcha. So we're all familiar, v'hanasiyim heviu. We know Rashi's pshat, that the Nasiyim were delayed participating in the donations to the Mishkan. They said when everybody brings what they need to bring, we'll fill in the rest. And everybody brought, so there's nothing left for them to bring. So Rashi says, Vanasiyim Heviu, they brought last. But if you look in Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, the word Vahanasiyim doesn't mean the princes. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says it means the clouds. The clouds brought. Where did they bring it from? So Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says they went to Pishain, they went to Egypt, and they took out the Avnei Shayim and the Avnei Miluim. And then the clouds went to Gan Eden, and they took Shem and Lamar. So according to Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, Shem and Lamar came from Gan Eden. But moreover, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid learns that the clouds didn't take the Avnei Shayim and the Avnei Miluim from Mitzrayim. They got them from Gan Eden as well. So it comes out, the Avnei Shayim came from Gan Eden, the Avnei Miluim came from Gan Eden, the Shem and Lamar came from Gan Eden. By the way, there's an amazing chidah. Chidah says, if you remember in Parsha's Chuma, you have V'yikchu li Chuma me'ez kolesh hashivenu es Levi, yikchu tikchu es Chumasi. V'zois ha Chuma asher tikchu meitam. Zahav, v'chesef, u'nechoshes, u'secheles, v'argaman, v'soila shani, v'sheish, v'oiroi selim adamim, v'oiroi schashim, v'atzei shitim, vav, 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 shemen lamar. What do you mean shemen lamar? What happened to the vav? Why did we stop with the vavs? In Vayakal Pekudei, we vav it all the way through. Why in Truma does the vav stop? Chida also wants to know, what do you mean v'yikchu li Truma and tikchu es Truma si? Are you giving it or I'm giving it? Chida says very simple. According to what we just learned, there are two Trumas. Some you bring, some I send you through the cloud. Yeah, not that cloud. Through the cloud, right? The cloud will bring you. So the first couple, zahav, v'chesef, u'nechoshes, that's all going on. V'yikchuli, that's what you give. But now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to give. You know what I'm going to give? I'm going to give shemen lama'ar. That's me. That's tikchu es trumasi. That's my truma. That's my contribution. Why do you think, friends, elements of the Mishkan came from Gan Eden? You don't think the Yibam Shem could have made it? That Klal Yisrael had Avnei Shayam, Klal Yisrael had Avnei Miluim. Why did the elements of the Mishkan have to come from Gan Eden? Because the entire purpose of the Mishkan, it's book 2. We're trying to bring the world back, not only to the Madrega of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the beginning of Bereshis, we're trying to get back to the very, very beginning of Bereshis. We're trying to get back to Gan Eden Mikedem. So it would help if we could get our hands on some of those relics from Gan Eden. So Yibam Shem said, I'll give you a hand. You do your part. You want to get back to Gan Eden Mikedem, I'm going to send you Shemen Lamar. I'm going to send you Avnei Shayam, Avnei Muam. All of these are items that Mamish came from Gan Eden. Marv Rabbi Yisai, here's the clincher. I don't think most people even thought of this. I certainly did not know this. When Adam HaRishon, first of all, the Chida is my favorite, by the way. The Chida's great-great-grandfather was the Chesed Avram, Rabbi Avram Azulai. Now, he always refers to him as his grandfather, and somebody asked the Chida, stop calling him your grandfather, he's your great-great-grandfather. So the Chida wrote a tshuva why he's allowed to refer to him as his great-great-grandfather, even though he's only his grandfather. But the Chesed Avram, by the way, why he refers to him as his grandfather, you know the Chesed Avram had a very chashuv job. After he was a Rav in Hebron, he was the rabbi in Gaza. Yeah, he was the Rav in Aza. Also, Rabbi Yisrael Najara, the author of Kari Bain, he was a Rav in Aza. He's buried in Aza. His kever is in Aza. The Chesed Avram was the great-great-grandfather of the Chida. By the way, it's interesting. Are you allowed to take on Hanukkah? I'm reminding because I was just here the day after Hanukkah. Are you allowed to take 8 candles, melt the bottom, and stick it on a table? Or do you need a kli? Does it say anywhere you need a menorah? The Mishnah Berurah is mashma, you don't need a menorah. The Mishnah Berurah talks about, be careful, if you stick the candles on the table doesn't burn down. Well, wait a second, don't you need a menorah? I mean, the Shvar didn't give him a menorah, how's that possible, right? What happened? Is he Jewish? He doesn't have a menorah? Apparently, maybe you don't need a menorah. That says somewhere you need a menorah. The Chesed Avram was mechadesh al pi Kabbalah. There's an inyan of a menorah. It's quoted in Shalsei Tshuvas Avnei Nezer. And he establishes 15 madregos of kalim for the menorah, gold, silver, copper. But the inyan of a menorah is the chidush of the Chesed Avram. It's not al pi halacha that you have to have a menorah. Chesed Avram writes, very interesting, that when Hashem put Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden, so why did he create the rest of them? What did he make New York for? I mean, New York existed. Why did Hashem make Gan Eden and then the rest of the world? So Chesed Avram says something very interesting. You have it on the sheet. It's kedai to see the holy words of the Chesed Avram once in a while. Number 20 on the second booklet. He says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam HaRishon, he put him in Gan Eden. So what was the rest of the world for? Gan Eden was the Beis HaMikdash for Adam HaRishon to serve Hashem la'avdo l'shamra. The rest of the world was where Adam HaRishon did his other mundane activities. When Hashem chased out Adam from Gan Eden, Vayashkein mikedem legan Eden es hakruvim v'es lahad hacherev hamisapeches. Okay, this is revolutionary. Probably we think of it the way we learned it in Cheder. Hashem made these, malachei chavala, and they're standing there with a sword, going like this, making sure Adam HaRishon doesn't go back into Gan Eden. But the lashon of Tana Debelio is melamed shahakruvim kadmu l'chol masa bereishis. Comes Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Gan Eden was a Beis HaMikdash. Gan Eden was a Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe Shem was Shoira Hishchina in Gan Eden. Where? On the Kruvim. There are Kruvim in Gan Eden. Gan Eden was the first Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe Shem dwelled in Gan Eden on 2 Kruvim. And the pasuk Vayagarish es Adam Vayashkem Mikedem, Hashem put before the world was created as Hakruvim. Meaning, if you want to know what did the world look like before Adam HaRishon sinned, there was a place called the Beis HaMikdash. What was its name? Gan Eden. What were there? 2 Kruvim. Where was the Rebbe Shem? He resided on the 2 Kruvim. And Adam HaRishon was thrown out of Gan Eden. And the same way now we understand, what does Hashem tell Adam when he does the Aveira? Ayeka. And the Medrash finds a commonality between the word Ayeka and Eicha. And all the Mepharshim are wondering, what's the connection between Ayeka and Eicha? It's very clear, it's very simple. Adam HaRishon lived in an actual Beis HaMikdash. It's called Gan Eden. There were 2 Kruvim there. There were Kalim there. There were Avnei Shoyham there. There was Shem and Lamar over there. The Shechina dwelled there. And Adam was thrown out of Gan Eden. That's book 1. Book 2. Book 2 is we need to bring the world back to the way it was, not only in the tents of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which we do through the Hakamas HaMishkan. Because the Shechina, we know that when Yitzchak married Rivka, so it says, Oyhala Sarah Imai, that the 3 special Nisim that were in the tent of Sarah were in the tent of Rivka. Let's think about those 3 Nisim. The Shechina was on the tent of Rivka like it was on the Mishkan. The Neiros lit from Shabbos to Shabbos, that was reminiscent of the Ner Ma'aravi that never went out. The Challah stayed fresh, that's the Lechem HaPanim. The tent of Avram and Sarah was no less than the Mishkan. But the purpose of Sefer Shemos is not just to bring the world back to the tent of Avram and Sarah, it's to bring the world back to Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden. What do we say at the end of Eicha? Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. So we all think it means Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Bring it back to the way it was when the Beis HaMikdash stood. No. Bring it back to the way it was in Gan Eden, where there was the first Mikdash, where Hashem dwelled on the 2 Kruvim, where there was Shem and Lamar, where there were Avnei Shoyam and Avnei Miluim. This is the function of Book 2. Book 2 is, we didn't do the job in Book 1, take 2. The Bahag did not have a better name for Shemos than Book 2. And finally, in the closing psukim of Shemos, the Shechina comes down on the Mishkan, and we're back to Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem in Gan Eden. Comes the Chassid Yavitz. Chassid Yavitz says, a davar noira. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, look at number 26. The Mishnah tells us there were 10 Nisim in the Beis HaMikdash. Asara Nisim Nasal Avesein Beis HaMikdash. Let's think about these 10 Nisim. No woman ever miscarried. No meat ever rot. No flies were found over there. Says the Chassid Yavitz, the common denominator of all these miracles was there's no decomposition, there's no death. Life is the way Hashem created Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden. You see what the Mishkan and the Mikdash is? It's a microcosm. It's reverting back to the original state of Brias Ha'olam. What a beautiful, what a perfect original name for Sefer Shemos. Book 2. Take 2. This time we got it right. I want to share with you another very interesting theme of Sefer Shemos, based on Reb Chaim Falaji. Rabbeinu B'chaya tells us in a number of places that every human being has 5 senses, associated with 5 organs. The eyes see, the ears hear, the nose smells, the hands feel, the tongue tastes. Why do we have 5 books of Chumash, says Rabbeinu B'chaya? You could see the importance of the 5 senses, realizing that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us Chamisha Chumshei Torah, Keneged, the 5 senses. Each sense corresponds to another one of the 5 books of the Chumash. Now it's interesting. The order that Rabbeinu B'chaya says is sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. But Reb Chaim Falaji sort of plays around a little bit with which sense corresponds to which book. The first book corresponds to sight. In fact, Reb Chaim Falaji writes, Bereshis are the letters Shebara'is, of vision. That's how you could hook the end of the Torah back to the beginning. Le'enei kol Yisrael, Bereshis. The main theme of Bereshis, everyone is looking or not looking. Vayar Elokim ki tov, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa, Vayar. Look at Rashi. Ra Hashem she'ein olam mishtamish. Hashem is looking at everything. Riyah is the predominant theme of Sefer Bereshis. People are going blind. In Sodom, they're going blind. Yitzchak the kid is going blind. The eyes of Yaakov Avinu are sealed shut. You could look in Bereshit, you'll be astounded. You never paid attention before? You'd be astounded. Dozens and dozens and dozens of eye. Who's the first child? Reuven. And then Shimon. Rabbeinu B'chaya is troubled. Doesn't Shmiya come before Riyah? According to Reb Chaim Falaji, no, there's the book of seeing. The focus is on seeing. Reb Chaim Falaji says the book of Vayikra is smell, reach nichayach, karbanos. Bamidbar is all about the man, tasting. Devarim is v'hayam shamaya tishmeu, it's listening. And he says Shemos is touch. Because the reason why Klal Yisrael were zocheh to come out of Mitzrayim is because they were nigdar ba'arayos. They were fenced in. They were tsanua ba'arayos. I couldn't help but think that if you take the order that Rabbeinu B'chaya says of the 5 senses, the way he orders it is sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. And you could make a very strong case that the book of Shemos is the book of listening. Why? I was happy you asked that question. Good. So if you look on your sheets, I wrote down 50 examples, 50 of Dvarim Noiram, how the entire Sefer Shemos is Shmiya. First of all, Nase v'nishma. That's like if someone were to ask, what do you think are the most prominent 2 words in Sefer Shemos? Nase v'nishma. By the way, I just saw, Avudraham says Shema. We say every day Shema, right? Shema. What does Shema mean? It means listen. It means understand. It means accept. So there are a lot of words we could have used. Why do we use the word Shema? Says Avudraham, because the zechus of Klal Yisrael is Hashem gave us the Torah. We said Nasa v'nishma. Thing is, right after we made the Egal, so we ruined the Nasa. The one thing that we always have in our back pocket is the Nishma. So Rebbe Shalom says, hang on to the Nishma. If you need help, invoke the Shema part. That you still have from the Egal. You ruined the Nasa. You said, Kum asei lanu Elohim. You ruined the Nasa, but the Nishma you always have. It's invoking the Zchus of Nasa and Nishma. By the way, it comes out very beautiful. The Magen Avram says, there's 6 things a Jew has to remember every day. That Miriam spoke Lashon Hara, to destroy Amalek, Maimon Har Sinai, Kabbalah HaTorah, Shabbos, the sixth Zechiros, besides Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is surely Dairaisa, what's the sixth? Chet Egel. Now, when are you supposed to remember it? I'm here to help you today, by the way. I'm going to save you 2 minutes, okay? People think you have to, at the end of davening, you have to say the Sheish Zechiros. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. The Magen Avram says the Sheish Zechiros are an Avarabba. You know that? The Magen Avram brings from the Arizal, the Sheish Zechiros are an Avarabba. When you say, it's in, get the Siddur Maslik Midvash. Stam, you should get the Siddur Maslik Midvash. Beautiful Siddur. It gives you, in Shema, Shema is Keneged Aseres HaDibros. How are you supposed to remember which Dibra and Shema? It gives you, there are a lot of good features in that Siddur. But one of the things it shows you is where in Avarabba the Sheish Zechiros are. So when you say L'Shimcha HaGadol, you're supposed to think that when we destroy Amalek, Hashem's name will be Gadol. When you say L'Hoidoi Slicha, there's a Magen Avram in Siman Samach. You say Hashem gave us a mouth to thank Him and not to speak Lashon Hara like Miriam. V'kerav Tanu Maimon Har Sinai. And when you say the word Ba'ahava, it's Magen Avram. You're supposed to think, now Hashem loves us, but now when we made the Egel, every day, I'm giving you a free Doiraisa. Every day when you say the words Be'ahava, Magen Avram writes, you should think, now Hashem loves us, but not by the Egel. So it comes out very beautiful. We say Be'ahava, but don't worry, Hashem, we still have Shema, we still have the Nishma part. Even though we ruined the Naseh, we immediately show the Rebbeinu Shalom, we still have something left from the... Okay. But you already recited it in the first time. So why do we say the word Ba'ahava there? The Torah actually talks about that. Yeah. Okay, so if you look in Sefer Shemos, you'll see, look at number 6, dozens and dozens of examples. Paroi will listen to you. Paroi didn't listen to you. Klal Yisrael will listen. Klal Yisrael didn't listen. Laman tesaper ba'aznei bincha. Shamu amim yirgazon. You'll see. Vayishma Yisroi. It didn't say Vayar Yisroi. Vayera Yisroi. Vayishma Yisroi. Even in Mishpatim. V'ratza adoinav es azam. It's mamish hafla v'fela. The entire book is predicated on Koyach HaShmiya. Now, it's very interesting. So that means the book of Bereshis is Sefer HaRe'iyah. The book of Shemos is Sefer HaShmiya. Why do you think that is? I want to share with you an amazing ha'ara. You know, in Shas Bavli, it always says, Tashma, come in here. Tashma, come in here. In the Zayar, Tachazi. Come and see. In Yerushalmi, Tachazi. Says Reb Chaim Falaji, why? Because in Bavel, it's the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "B'machashakim hoishivani k'mei." In Bavel, you're in darkness, so you don't see clearly. You need to infer. You need inference. The Zohar, the Yerushalmi, is in Eretz Yisrael. It's Koyach HaRe'iyah. You have clarity. You're able to see. That's why Reb Chaim Falaji brings the Yud. Yud is Chachma. Chachma allows Re'iyah. In Eretz Yisrael, the Rabbanim are called Rabbi. The Amoram in Bavel are called Rav. The Yud represents Re'iyah. Mamela, the Zohar, the Yerushalmi is Tachazi, the Bavli is Tashma. So it comes out very beautiful. Sefer Bereshis is in Eretz Yisrael. It takes place in Eretz Yisrael. The whole book is in Eretz Yisrael. So it's the book of Re'iyah. Sefer Shemos, the whole book for the first time is in Chutz La'aretz. It's Sefer Shmis. You say, what do you mean? But the end of Bereshis, we're not in Eretz Yisrael anymore. Exactly. Kivan shenishtabed Yisrael. Kivan nistemu einayim shel Yisrael. So our eyes started to close. But the book of Bereshis is the book of Re'iyah. Let's end with the following. Sefer Shemos, the Bahag calls book 2. This is perhaps the most important principle to bear in mind when we learn Sefer Shemos. We began the Shiur Masei Avos Siman Labanim, that the book of Bereshis was the pre-enactment of the future history of the Jewish people. You see, Avram Avinu goes down to Mitzrayim, so the Ramban says, so Klal Yisrael will have to go down to Mitzrayim. They take Sarah, so they make a Gzeira v'chol habas techayon. Paroi is afflicted with Negaim, Hashem brings Makos. Paroi gives Avram and Sarah gifts, so Klal Yisrael leaves Mitzrayim, Baruch Hashkada. And all the events of Bereshis were a pre-enactment of the future events that will happen to the Jewish people. Whatever happens to us today, it's because something happened in Sefer Bereshis that created it. There is not a shadow of a doubt that what happened on October 7th has something to do with an episode in Sefer Bereshis that took place in Gaza. By the way, you know, the Rashbam writes, it's a frightening Rashbam. I'm not commenting, I'm just going to tell you what he says. The Rashbam says that if you look in the sequence of the Chumash, right before the Akedah, Avram Avinu makes a treaty with Avimelech. He says, I'm not going to fulfill the mitzvah of Lo Yisachaya Kol Neshama. We're going to be at peace together. Says Rashbam, Achar hadvarm ha'ele v'alekim nisas Abraham, nisas alashon of Masa Meriva. Hashem said, I didn't give you Eretz Yisrael to make peace treaties. You're making peace in Eretz Yisrael, go take your son and kill him. That's Rashbam. Without any editorial, I'm not adding, taking away. Simple pshuto shel mikra, the Rashbam says that the Akedah was a punishment to Abraham Avinu. It's Rashbam. But you could be sure, whatever took place, it's in Bereshis. But you should know that Sefer Shemos is also Masei Avos Siman Labanim. What's the Masei Avos Siman Labanim? Rabbeinu Bechaya tells us, Kol Hanavim Misnavim B'Signoin Echad. Ki Meitzeischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflais. All the miracles of Yitzias Mitzrayim are a pre-enactment of the miracles of the Gula HaSida. Rabbeinu Bechaya says all the Makos will replay themselves before Mashiach comes. Kriyas Yamsuf will replay itself before Mashiach comes. Rabbeinu Bechaya writes that if you look in the Psukim, you have 3 dates given: 210, 400, 430. 210 from when we entered Mitzrayim. 400 from the birth of Yitzchak. 430 from the Bris Bein Abasarim. Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, if you look in Sefer Daniel, 3 dates are given. They correspond to the 3 dates of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, if in Mitzrayim, where we knew 210, 400, 430, and we still couldn't calculate how it would be reconciled until it happened, nobody knows how the dates in Daniel will be reconciled until it happens. Every last detail in Sefer Shemos was practice for the Gula HaSida. Whatever will happen in the future will be on a much grander scale than it happened in Sefer Shemos. When your children ask you, why are we remembering something that happened 3,000 years ago? You say, no, you're making a mistake. We're not reading this to remember ancient history. We're reading this to understand that there are coming attractions for the Jewish people. Everything we're going to read now is to remind us and that to inspire us that we should aspire and yearn and pine that every single word in Sefer Shemos will replay itself. Be'ezus Hashem b'mheira v'yameinu. Rav Sadia Goin writes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought many makos on Klal Yisrael, on the Mitzrim. Sasemes has a chidush, 613 makos. If you add up the 10 in Mitzrayim and the 50 Alayam, and the 40 in Mitzrayim and the 200 Alayam, and the 50 in Mitzrayim and the 250 Alayam, plus the 10 makos, and the Tzach Hadash B'Achav, it's 613. 613 makos. And how many words did Hashem say to bring those makos? 2 words. Done anochi. 2 words. And in 2 words, the Rebbeinu Shalom brought 613 makos. Says Rav Sadia Goin, and with how many words did HaKadosh Baruch Hu promise us that they're going to be nisim and aflois by the Gula HaSida? Thousands and thousands of words in Yeshaya, in Yechezkel, in the Trei Asar. The miracles that are upcoming for Klal Yisrael will be even on a grander scale than what we're going to read about in Shemos Va'era Boi B'Shalach. We read these parshas, it's not ancient history, it's what's in store Be'ezus Hashem B'mheira v'yameinu. Thank you very much.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.